We're going to look at graphs of functions using function notation. So in part A, it says graph f of x equals 3/4 x plus 7. So at this point, hopefully you recognize that as y equals mx plus b form, which means we have a linear equation. So to graph that, remember we start at the y-intercept at 0, 7. And then from that point, we count a slope of 3/4. Well, a slope of 3/4 means we go up 3 to the right 4. Notice on our grid, if we go up 3, we're kind of off the grid and to the right 4. We can kind of estimate to be right about there, but because the grid ends there, we can't plot that point exactly. So rather than counting up 3 to the right 4, we can change both directions. Down 3 and to the left 4. So down 3 and to the left 4. So that'll keep us on our line. So if we draw that, we end up with that equation, or that graph. The second one, in part B, g of x equals x squared plus 2x minus 4, that's one that I would suggest you use your calculator for. So if we go to our table and we enter in x squared, so x and then exponent 2, plus 2x minus 4, press enter, and then in our table we could just pick some table values to plot the points. And from our work before, we should have noticed that when you graph a y equals x squared equation, it ends up being a U shape. So keep that in mind. So we just plot some of these points. Negative 5, 11 is off the grid. So we look at the next one there and the next one. So there's several points that we can plot. And then notice that once you get to negative 1 for the x value, the y values will start repeating themselves. So that's where the center of that U shape is, at negative 1, negative 5. So we'll plot those points, and I'll put it up here because I already have it done just to save time. My line I messed up on when I drew it, I missed it. Okay, but it looks like this. And then there's the U shape with it. Okay, the next thing that it asks in part C is, using the graph, find the value or values of x for which f of x equals g of x. So what that's saying is, what x values does f of x equal g of x? So where does the y value on the line equal the y value on the U shape? Well, that's going to be where they intersect. So we notice that they intersect here and then over here a little farther. The first one is fairly easy to find. The x value, negative 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's where they intersect for the x at negative 4. So that's one of your answers, x equals negative 4. And then the other x value where they intersect at, it looks like if you go between 2 and 3, and maybe 2.5 or 2.6 or 2.7, I have 2.7 on mine, but as long as you have like right around 2.5, 2.6 in that area, then that'd be acceptable. So that's just saying, where does the y equal the y? So y on one graph equals the y on the other graph. Okay, moving along to the next example. Now we're given a graph of g of x, and we want to find each of the following. So we want to find g of negative 2. Remember that this function notation, whatever's in the parentheses is the x value. So when x is negative 2, that's right here, the y value is up at positive 2. So g of negative 2 equals 2. G of 0 means that when the x value is 0, where's the y value? It's down here at -4. So we're at -4. Notice here that we don't have an actual equation, so we can't substitute numbers in for x into an equation. We're just reading the graph. So G of 3 means that when x is 3, what is y? Well, when x is 3, that's right here, we go down to the graph and notice that we are about halfway between the boxes, so right around -5.5. Next one, G of x equals 2. Well, now notice they switched it up on us. Instead of having a number in the parentheses like we did before, now we don't have the x value, but we're told that G of x equals 2. Remember, that's a fancy way of saying y equals 2. So where does the y value equal 2? Well, the y value equals 2 when you go straight across. So look at the top of my pen. Okay, so right here. When y equals 2, we have a point over here and another point over here. So what x values does that happen at? -2 and x equals +6. So there's your two answers. X equals -2 and +6. Try the last couple. G of x equals -6 and then G of x equals 0. So I'll just give you the answers here. If G of x equals -6, that means we're down here, right at the bottom of your U shape. So that happens when x equals 2. We get -6 for the y value. And then G of x equals 0, that's essentially just asking you to find the x-intercepts. So right here, so about -1.5, and then right around x equals 5.5. That's where G of x equals 0. Okay, the second example, we have a bit of a crazier graph, but I'll give you the chance for you to try that, then I'll just put the answers up. So same kind of question, we're given f of x, so pay attention to when you have the number in the parentheses compared to f of x equals a number. The only difference is they're giving you x when you have a number inside the parentheses. They're giving you y when the number is outside the parentheses. So go through and try that, and I'll put the answers up. So there's the different answers. And if I were to grade something like this, I am lenient when you do have decimals involved. So for example, with f of x equals 0, you're finding the x-intercepts down here. So this point, I just said -1.5. It might be closer to -1.3 or maybe -1.4. As long as you're in the general ballpark between -1 and -2, I would give you credit for that. If you said -1.9, well, that'd be closer to -2, so I would mark off for that. So you should be within a reasonable amount of the value. So that is how you look at function notation on a graph and graphing functions.